Hi all, this is Vanessa Love and this is my channel about the mental health field. So if you are not aware, my first master's is in art therapy, and there's a lot of different controversies within art therapy: product versus process, open studio. There's a whole thing. I will probably eventually get to those, and hopefully you'll be able to decide for yourself what you would like. So one of the controversies that I've unintentionally been a part of is coloring pages. Now, the controversy with coloring pages is that there are a lot of art therapists who don't want to include coloring pages as a part of art therapy. They want to have more involvement from the client. They want to be able to see the product or see the process, I guess, in order to really assess the person and what's going on. And I mean, there's a lot to that. The reason why I support having coloring pages in art therapy sessions is because some people haven't touched art materials since they were about 12, which is about the time when people decide whether or not they are artistic or not. So now you have people who are coming to an art therapist who want to deal with, the same thing that anyone else going to therapy would want to deal with, and they are not familiar with anything other than markers, colored pencils, and crayons. So they may not really be able to get to a point where they can just make something up, because they're still probably in that 12-year-old, everything I do kind of sucks, I don't want to do that type of stuff. And I don't think that there's anything about coloring pages that says that they can't be expressive. There's definitely things like what topics or what the subject is of that coloring page that attracts that person. Just the same way that making a collage might also be indicative of what that person is thinking about. And okay, let's say that it doesn't matter. Let's say that people just choose whatever random coloring page they find and they do. There's still something with that. And, for me, it's just one of those, this could be important. And I think that some people who don't want to support coloring pages don't also want to know much about color theory and if a color might mean something to someone. Now, I'm going to point out some things, but generally speaking, the people who do go into color theory and therapy believe that things like drawing yourself really small or having black and red in your pictures include someone being depressed. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, black and red over here. So I feel like black and red for me means accomplishments, because San Diego State, one of the schools I did attend, does have black and red as their colors. So for me, that's something different, and that should be taken into consideration as well. So when it really comes down to it, it really depends on what the person's definition of art therapy is. And I get very philosophical about this because I've taken plenty of philosophy classes. I've taken philosophy of art. So there is something in that where I'm just like, okay, so what is your definition of art? What's your definition of therapy? What's your definition of art therapy? Why can't coloring pages be included in this? And to me, it's like I ask questions, and just for my own clarification, and these often come across, unfortunately and really unintentionally, as me questioning authority and how dare you have opinions that are different from mine. But really, they're like, oh, but what's the limitation on that? Does having collage images also why doesn't that count against being an art therapy? Like how is that okay in art therapy but not coloring pages? Or What if your friend does this really cool outline and you want to bring it to your art therapy session so you can color it in, and then you're all excited about it, and your art therapist says, no, we're not going to do that because that's not important. I mean, I would be pretty offended if someone did that to me. Be like, I mean, this is an hour to myself. Like, how can you tell me what's important and not important when I'm actively involved? And so, again, my brain kind of goes into like, okay, now we're heading into philosophy, really, like, and definitions. And I also like to know definitions just so that I can be like, okay, so your definition of art therapy is this, my definition is this. This is why this is included and why you wouldn't include that. The other thing is that I've accidentally offended people when I've been like, yeah, but you only did a coloring page. And to see kind of that moment of someone like really feeling offended and like just knowing that I accidentally hurt them because I was dismissive of what they were doing, even though for them that was outside of their range of what they usually do. Like, this is where I kind of feel like, unfortunately, art therapy becomes elitist. Like, no, that can't be it because we have to be there. Oh God, But the origins of this come from the beginnings of art therapy. Art therapy was not well understood for a long time. So you have these people who are trying to tell people, it's valid, I'm telling you, it's valid, there's research, we're researching, like, it's valid, I'm valid. I'm not just the art teacher, I'm an art therapist, I know psychology, I know what's going on. So you have these people who at the beginning of this century, and probably up until the 90s, maybe late 2000s, were saying, like, hey, it's still valid, no, I'm still valid, like, what I do is still valid, like, please validate what I'm doing. And so when you have someone who's like, you guys just do fun things like color, that's where it kind of gets offensive, and where people are like, no, what I do is valid, it's not about that. And so you get more of this kind of opposition and rebelliousness where it's like, no, but this is really what we're doing. Please understand that. Now, unfortunately, some of the people who did have to go through that struggle are still in the field today. And I feel like they've kind of had their time. I'm ready for them to really retire so that the younger generation can really move forward, get things done, really develop their own sense of what art therapy is, instead of having people trash them, try and stomp them out. It's really a weird thing to have people in the same field who either got their master's or had the certification or whatever it was before there was schools that were actually doing it. And I think it was only 2013 where the first PhD program actually appeared for art therapy. So before that, we could only be masters, we couldn't be doctorates. And so you have people who have basically been grandmothered in because they've been there for so long, doing all of these things and struggling, and kind of resenting, unfortunately, the younger generation who are like, hey, all right, I'm new to this field, let's do this, let's get this done, let's, help people. And they're like, you can help people in the way that we think that you need to help people. We're not allowing this, we're allowing this. And that's obviously problematic. And they've had a lot of problems with inclusion. And I don't mean like inclusion as identity. I mean inclusion like, hey, there's this expressive arts therapist who said this, or there's this music therapist who wanted to, talk about this art aspect of their music therapy, or, that type of thing. It really has become this very narrow definition. And I'm just kind of waiting for people to retire. So it's like, okay, you're out of the way. Thank you. All right. So now what we can do, instead of this other stuff. And it does get kind of annoying because you go through school, you have all of these requirements, you have all these recommendations, you have to jump through all of these hoops, pay all this money, and then you're like, okay, I have these ideas. And you're still being stomped out by people who are like, well, I've been in the field for 40, 30, 50 years or whatever, and you can't do that. And it's like, okay, but actually the field is changing, society is changing, politics are changing what we do, so we have to adjust. And it can't just be the way that you think that it is. It has to be also the way that we are going. And we are clearly going a different way. Again, there have been plenty of people, especially in the founding mothers, who didn't get along and who were like, no, it's this and not this. And it doesn't have to be that way. It can be like, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from. How about let's include that? That we can come up with a definition that can definitely include assessments and art and whatever that, that kind of means. But yeah, it is really interesting, especially there aren't that many people who have masters. There's not that many people who have masters in art therapy. And then everyone kind of gets in and puts their heels in and just, no, this is my definition. And again, it's like, it almost becomes elitist because you have to be like, no, that's not what I do. No. I don't just play. I don't just have fun. I do something serious with this. Like, I learned all of these other things. And, instead of being like, yeah, well, sometimes therapy can be fun. Sometimes art therapy can include that. That's okay. We're still working on A, B, and C for this person. It doesn't have to be, you guys had fun, and kind of that dismissiveness. And then also with that becoming this elitist of like, no, but that's not real art therapy. I mean, the other thing that has happened over the last maybe like 5 or 6 years is that there is this definite idea of coloring pages, as I've said, in art therapy sessions. But before that, there were plenty of coloring books with mandalas. And mandalas are those circles that have those interesting designs and stuff in them. And I mean, people, first of all, have been studying mandala design since like the 1960s. And there's actually a credential, which I have, that includes analyzing mandalas and analyzing the shapes and how many shapes, the number of the shapes that are in your mandala and what colors you use and all of that type of stuff. And with my certification, so this is called the MARI, the Mandala Assessment Research Instrument, it's really interesting. It's very scientific. It's like, okay, well, this person took thousands of different pictures, mandala pictures from across the world and kind of put them together, looked at the shapes, looked at if there was repeating numbers of shapes, and made this very scientific thing. And so being MARI certified, it's kind of like, okay, well, there are coloring pages, though, that are mandalas and can be used to our advantage. But now you're saying that the people who were art therapists who created some of these things are now invalid because you don't want to include coloring pages in your art therapy practice, which that's up to you. That's completely up to you. That's not saying that we can't include them or that they're not valid or that it's somewhere where, we can't have that at all. That's not up to you. That's up to every art therapist individually to determine how they practice art therapy. And I wish that there was more of that respect in this community, especially with the, master's levels, than there is with all of these people who are arguing and, basically putting their will on other people and how they're practicing. Because, I mean, who are we hurting? Who are we hurting by having coloring pages? What is it really that is the problem underneath all of this? And I don't have any good answers there because I really don't know. That's not my stance. So I don't know why people are so, very tied to that stance and what really the underlying issue is. And maybe it's that they want recognition of like, oh, you must be a wonderful art therapist because you don't approve of this. You don't like this. It's kind of a weird thing, especially when they're being aggressive towards you. Like, oh, well, I see, you're better than me. Great. Yeah, of course. I don't know anything. I've only been practicing for 10 years. I mean, what possibly could I know? Well, thank you for correcting me. And I don't know if they really, it's odd that they don't know how to approach people, but also that they are so aggressive in their approach and telling other people how to practice, which I don't think it's not their place, and it's definitely like not getting them to whatever thing that they're really looking for underneath all of that. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for you, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks for watching.